morning and welcome to the University of Toronto's Summer Academy podcast series. My name is Ranji and I'm your host. This morning we have students from the Global Citizenship Program and they'll be talking about food insecurity. Before we begin our conversation, can we just ask everyone to introduce themselves? Can you tell us your name and where you're from?
My name is Arseny and I'm from Ukraine.
Hello everyone, my name is Ricki and I'm from Japan.
Hello, my name is Kokone and I'm also from Japan.
Thank you and welcome to the studio. First question for you would be, which country did you choose for your study on food insecurity?
For our project, we chose to talk about Mongolia.
Okay, can you give us some background information about Mongolia?
So we decided to choose Mongolia because we believe it's a very unknown country compared to most other countries. It's very unique due to its population distribution, with 90% of its population living in the capital Ulaanbaatar. Mongolia is a country located in Central East Asia, bordered by Russia, Kazakhstan and China. It occupies approximately 603,000 square miles. Despite that, its population is only 3.5 million people, making it one of the most sparsely populated sovereign countries in the world. Mongolia has a GDP of 17.5 billion. The GDP per capita is $5,838. Mongolia is a developing country where an average of 1 out of every 4 people experiencing moderate to severe food insecurity, particularly in its large nomadic community. I'll now pass the mic over to Kokone for the causes.
I'd like to introduce the first cause of food insecurity in Mongolia, such as harsh climate and natural disaster. Mongolia faces long, freezing cold winters and short, dry summers. The biggest problem is these climates is called drought. Drought is a natural disaster that happens during a dry summer followed by a winter. When this happens, plants don't grow and millions of animals would be killed because they cannot find enough food and where they can live. This makes it harder to produce enough food. Now I will ask Ricki about the first effects of food insecurity in Mongolia.
The effect of harsh winters, or dzuds, is especially severe. These winters can be so cold and long-lasting that livestock are unable to graze, leading to mass animal deaths. In the winter of 2009 to 2010 alone, Mongolia lost over 8 million animals due to a dzud, which affected more than 800,000 people across the country. Since around 1/3 of Mongolia's population relies on livestock herding, this has a devastating effect on food access and income. Most importantly, with animals, families lose meat, milk, wool, and income, leaving them with no food and no way to earn money. Therefore, many people experience hunger, debt, and long-term stress. Rural communities, in particular, face long-term health issues due to poor nutrition and harsh living conditions, especially when food, air, or health services are limited or delayed by the weather. Now I would like to ask Arseny about the first solution.
So the drought is indeed a very debilitating natural disaster for Mongolia and its population. However, recently, with the help from the UN and the World Health Organization, Mongolia has been able to develop the drought response plan, which aims to help 40% of the population who are impacted the most. They also employed a lot of first responder teams to help deal with the consequences of the droughts, to support people who are affected most, such as the farmers. I will now pass the mic back to Kokone for the second cause.
Thank you, Arseny, for telling us about one important solution. Next, I'm going to talk about the second cause that Mongolia relies a lot on livestock and imported food. Most foods in Mongolia come from animals like meat and dairy. Many families in Mongolia raise animals, but they don't grow a lot of vegetables or fruits. So the country needs to import food from other countries such as China and Russia. The problem is, if there is a global crisis and those imports are delayed or prices go up, food becomes expensive and harder to get. Like during the COVID-19 pandemic, when borders were closed and food shipments slowed down. That leads to shortages, especially in rural or poor communities. Now I will ask Ricki about the second effects.
Thank you, Kokone, for describing the second cause of food insecurity. Now let's look at the effects it had on food production or import. This effect of importing is that they make farming very difficult and unpredictable. Mongolia has short growing season of only 90 to 100 days, and the increasing dryness has made it even shorter in recent years. With limited rainfall and higher temperatures, crop yields continue to fall, as well as the import. For instance, wheat production dropped by 24% in 2017 due to dry weather, which led to rising food prices and shortages in rural markets. As a result, many families, especially those outside of cities, struggle to afford enough nutrients food. Then children and elderly people are often the first to suffer, with increased cases of undernourishment and weakened immune systems. This puts more pressure on already limited health systems. With that being said, even urban areas feel the impact, with low harvest driving up national food prices. Let me now invite Arseny to share the second solution to this problem.
Thank you, Ricki. So ever since the COVID pandemic, Mongolia has been making huge strides in becoming self-reliant in the food sector, as the country began investing into their agricultural clusters. Mongolia has been investing huge sums of money in order to support its local farmers and give incentives for people to grow their own food. This not only helps to save huge amounts of money on import costs, but makes the country a lot more food secure. I will now pass it back to Kokone for the third cause.
The third big cause of food insecurity in Mongolia is poverty. Many rural areas or poor parts of cities cannot afford enough food, even if it's available. In Mongolia, about 1 in 4 people live in poverty. Many of them live in rural areas or in the outskirts of cities, where jobs are harder to find and food stores are far away. They also may not get a balanced diet with enough nutrition by eating cheap food that's unhealthy. Also, sometimes they skip meals altogether because they don't have enough money. Now I will pass mic Ricki about the third effects of food insecurity in Mongolia.
Let's now focus on the specific effect that droughts have on food insecurity, as well as some additional informations. The particular effect of this cause is that they sharply increase food shortages and poverty. Mongolia has experienced frequent droughts in the last 2 decades, with some regions seeing rainfall drop by up to 40%. This means crops fail more often, and animals suffer from thirst and lack of grazing land. Plus, drought has been a double more often and had a severe impact since they follow or come before droughts, weakening livestock before winter even begins. According to the World Bank, About almost 40% of rural Mongolians are at risk of falling below the poverty line due to these climate shocks. Next, families lose both food and income sources, and many are forced to skip meals or reduce portion size. Children are hit hardest, with rising malnutrition rates, reduced school attendance, and a poor academic performance due to hunger and fatigue. Therefore, droughts not only impact health and hunger, but also education and long-term development. Next, I would like to turn it over to Arseny to talk about the search solution.
So Mongolia has been actually doing a lot in order to combat this ever-present problem with rural communities. One of the biggest things it's doing is charities. So Mongolia has been really promoting the fact that people in rural areas don't have food security like people in the urban areas do. And a lot of people have actually not only donated sums of money in order for food to be brought to these rural communities, but volunteer teams have been set up to go into these mountains, to these rural communities, to deliver food for them. Also, another thing that has been done is the implementation of more production oversight. So all of the food has been raised to a much better quality. In 2015, the country successfully trained 42 food inspectors, which greatly improved the overall health index and quality of the food, further benefiting Mongolia's food security. I'll now pass the mic back to Kokone yet again for our fourth and final cause of Mongolia's food insecurity.
Thank you, Arseny, for introducing the third solution of food insecurity in Mongolia. I will explain the final cause of food insecurity in Mongolia, that Mongolia has its weak farming infrastructure. Farming in Mongolia faces many challenges, not just because of the weather. There's not enough support for local farmers in Mongolia. For example, there's not a lot of farmland. Many farmers often don't have access to modern machines or advise they still use old methods and training to help them grow crops better. These causes make it difficult to grow food locally in a big way in Mongolia. So even though there's land, it's not used to its full potential. Now I will ask Ricki about the final effects of food insecurity in Mongolia.
Thank you, Kokone, for outlining the fourth cause and final cause of food insecurity in Mongolia. Finally, we'll look at how desertification affects communities. The effect of desertification is that more and more land becomes dry, cracked, and unusable for farming and grazing. Over 70% of Mongolia's land is now affected by that desertification, and this is increasing due to overgrazing, deforestation, and climate change. As land turns to desert, herders and farmers lose their way of life and are forced to leave rural areas. Every year, thousands migrate to cities like Ulaanbaatar in the search of food and work. However, the city already struggles with overcrowding, high unemployment, and rising food costs. For example, nearly 30% of urban households report some form of food insecurity. Therefore, desertification not only pushes people out of the countryside, but also adds pressure to the cities where resources are already stretched. With that being said, food insecurity becomes a national problem and affects every part of Mongolian society.
And one potential thing they could do to combat this is to provide more benefits to farmers to stay and work. These benefits could include free education for children, better healthcare, or a higher salary in order to encourage these farmers to work harder and stay in Mongolia to produce more crops for them. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for a wonderful discussion. It was very interesting to know about food insecurity in Mongolia, its causes, effects, and solutions.